afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, that didn't sound like quite like we into Saturday yet. Let's do it again. Hey, what's up, everybody?
All right.
Okay, that sounds more like it. I am Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade, and I am honored to help out in this conversation today. Before we get started, I want to kind of give a little bit of a context. We'll jump in, hear about the exhibition, have a dialogue, and then see what questions you have, if that's okay. Okay, good. I'll start out by introducing, on my far right, Dr. Samuel Livingston. He's an associate professor of Africana Studies, is that the correct? Okay, Africana Studies at Morehouse College, so right down the street. And he is also a native of Georgetown, South Carolina, a fluent Gullah Geechee speaker. Geechee? What's that?
But
fluent in the culture.
In the culture.
Fluent in the culture. So I am honored to have him as part of this conversation. Our artist of the hour today is Najee Dorsey. He is the one that has put together and has envisioned this beautiful exhibition that I'm hoping you've had time to be able to look at. If you haven't, you certainly have time after the conversation to be able to do that. And he's also the owner of this beautiful space over there with his wife, Satira.
Satira. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're the owner of Black Art in America. And so I just want to acknowledge both of them. For those of you that don't know, I used to live in East Point, right down the street. And when I was looking for a building, my realtor brought me over here. This used to be a church. And when I drove up, I was like, no way. I did not have a vision. And what they have done, and I don't know if you have seen it, there's some pictures of before and after pictures right at the front. What they have done with this space is nothing short of amazing. And so if this is your first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. If it is not, or if you have friends, please let them know that this exists and invite them to come down. And then finally, again, I will introduce myself. I am the owner of Healing Paradigm, which is a counseling center here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I happen to write about lots of African spiritual traditions and have gotten pulled into specifically African spiritual traditions and African American spiritual traditions. And so I'm happy to be part of this conversation today. Before we get started, what I want to do is, Najee, if you can kind of talk a little bit about this exhibition, give us the context, like kind of contextualize this for us. And particularly, what I'm mostly interested in is, well, actually, let me back up for a second. Mm-hmm. You're from Nebraska? No.
Arkansas.
Arkansas, yep. Sorry, two different places. My bad.
It's all good.
Okay, I think that's important. I am from Los Angeles, California. I think that it's important to contextualize that because someone who is a child of the grandchild of the Great Migration has a very different experience of this exhibition and what this work means than someone that is from Arkansas and Georgetown, South Carolina. So I want us to be in conversation about that piece of it too. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you can help us understand what was your inspiration behind this particular exhibition?
Well, first, so I'm from Blythe, Arkansas, Mississippi County, Arkansas, and I grew up in Blythe most of my life, and rural South. I mean, when I left, it was 13,000 people in the city. To give you some idea, like at the age of 12, my summer job was chopping cotton at the age of 12 and making $18 for the day for 8-hour shift, you know? And, you know, we had the cotton fields outside. I did art all through school. But my mom was married to my dad, and he was from Louisiana. My grandparents moved the family in the 50s from a sugarcane plantation in Napoleonville to New Orleans. So my dad grew up in New Orleans, and I spent a few years there. My bodies of work I have like recurring themes in my work, and this is like 20 years in the making, if not a little longer. In the show, you're going to find, you know, the interior space of how we live, like when you first walk into the gallery. though that section is kind of showing how we live with the family pictures on the wall. And a lot of my work, I got the iconography of like the potbelly stove, and it reminds me of a time when my parents and grandparents grew up. And in my mind, thinking about times of segregation, communities were closer. We were forced to deal with each other and live around each other. But my mom often talked about how she felt like she was a black sheep of the family, and even though she wasn't the oldest and she wasn't the male, she was the one that was relegated to having to go get the wood to put in the potbelly stove, And so that's part reason why that's always been this iconography that you find in my work. Just kind of takes you to the rural South. And then from there, it comes across over into like New Orleans and the Juke Joint and the Crossroads, and the story of Robert Johnson and the Crossroads has been a muse of mine for a long time. For two reasons primarily, I would say, because of proximity of where I grew up. I grew up an hour and a half from the Crossroads, right? And then also just the ideal of Robert Johnson being, he was a musician, but he's an artist, right? And he said that the heck with everything else that's going on, I want to play this guitar, and this is the only thing I want to do, right? And so I resonate with that as a creative, because that's what we do as creatives. We leave the comfort of a supposed security of a 9-to-5 to say, this is the most important thing in my life that I want to do, and I want to make art, right? And so that's in part why I do my Robert Johnson. But I changed many years ago because I didn't want to do his likeness, because that story of the Crossroads is a story that we all share. We all come to various crossroads in our life where we have to make decisions to go one path or another. So it's really a muse and a metaphor for just the life journey. And through the Crossroads is various stories, which I'll get into another time. And then over here on this wall, it shows the interior, the installation. So there's multiple installations. You got the installation of the Juke Joint. That's where we partied, had a good time, and the installation that's up at the very front with the family photos, you find the photos in the work to take us to how we grew up, with the salon of the family photos on the wall. But I want to tell you a story. Like, I've always been a hunter-gatherer and like collecting things. My wife Satiri and I, we love to go thrifting. And, I'm always picking up knickknacks. So like things, I picked up quilts, and when you see the old radio or the 1950s iron up front, like these are all things that I pick up. I don't know why. It just really speaks to me. The same thing with vintage photographs, right? So what's interesting is 3 weeks ago, we had a lady that came in her 90s. She was 92. I posted about this on social, and she said, listen, I had a good friend that passed away a few years ago. She left me her things, of which were her old family photographs, right? But I have no connection to them, but I didn't want to just discard them. But something told me to stop here with them. I said, you came to the right place. I use them all the time. And so over half the photographs that's on that installation come from those family photos. And I've often said, stories untold are stories forgotten, and the reason why I use a lot of mixed media work, whether it's, old Scrabble pieces or a piece of an old license plate or all these vintage things or things that's once discarded, is because they have life in them, they have energy in them. And, to me, I guess it's kind of like what some would call ancestral memory. They have a memory and something to them that when I put my energy with that, it makes the works really dynamic. I call it my gumbo, or that funk, that lingering effect, And over here, this section, it's really a spinoff from not only my Crossroads, but when I started to get into my Return to Eden series, and that came about as a way of celebrating, Black love and safe and sacred spaces, imagining a new Eden, essentially, right, for us to exist. On that wall, if you, in all my work, you'll see, the men are kind of fly. They dress, they dapper. Well, that's intentional, because to me, it's my protest against how we're often viewed in media. And so I dress the men up intentionally in this form of dandyism. And I've been doing that for a while. So when I think about, the movie Sinners came out, how many of y'all have seen Sinners, right? Excellent, right? So when I saw the movie, I was inspired to say, hey, this is the perfect time to showcase my body of work. And then when the Met Gala came in success from that, I'm like, man, this is a really perfect time to showcase what I do, because you get the Southern culture, the Southern funk, and the history of what I do in conversation with like how I handle the men and the dandyism. So we got the dandy wall over here, and then we finish up with Black Love on that back wall. So this basically contextualizes the show, other than the two pieces right here, where I've got James Baldwin shining the light on the American flag, the hypocrisy, and then the flag it reads, love hate black people, love hate black people. And it's just, America loves our labor. They love our culture, but they don't want to give us full citizenship, right? And then it's in conversation with this little boy who's holding, it's titled Born Liberated. He's holding a black liberation flag. And I'm arguing that we are who we are from the time we were children. And his first act of liberation is liberating the fireflies around him, right? And then the tricycle is symbolic of a journey that his life is going to lead him onto with a certain level of consciousness to community and humanity. So that's what this show is all about. I can't get into everything right now because we're about to have us a good conversation, but just to give you some context, okay?
I have a question I want to follow up. How many people have heard of Robert Johnson? Do you know who Robert Johnson is? Okay, good number of people. So can you give us a little more context of who he is for those that don't?
Yeah, so Robert Johnson was a blues musician in the 20s and 30s. I think he passed away at the age of 27. There's only 2 known photographs of him. He was born in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. But the folklore, the legend around Robert Johnson is supposedly because he sold his soul to the devil to be the baddest guitar player ever, right? And that's the folklore and that's the myth. For me, I don't really get into that because for me, it's like anytime we've excelled at anything, it had to be somebody else or something other than us just putting all of ourselves into something. And we know where all good things come from. So that's the legend around Robert Johnson.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because I was talking to my daughter about it and I was telling her who Robert Johnson is, and then I was like, oh, it's kind of like Beyonce now where people talk about her being part of the Illuminati and those kinds of things. And so it's always this idea that if we are talented or if we are popular, that it couldn't be us. It could not possibly, the Egyptians could not have built the pyramids. It has to be aliens. That kind of dialogue. So yeah. Dr. Livingston, I want to get you to jump into this conversation. When you see this exhibit, particularly from Africana Studies perspective, particularly from the perspective of coming from Gullah Geechee culture in Georgetown, South Carolina, 2 different places, sorry y'all.
Gullah Geechee set tripping up in there.
Fair enough. What does it speak to you? What does it say to you?
It says to me, thank you, first of all, for helping organize this, and Brother Najee and your sister, where's
Sateria?
She's
in the back.
She's over
organizing this space. And I could really spend the whole time just listening to you talk about each one of these works. But for me, as a Gullah Geechee man who grew up about 2 miles from where my ancestors were enslaved. So your comment about the perspective of a person whose family didn't largely make the Great Migration, even though I have aunts and uncles who left and went, but largely our folks is basically moved about 6 or 7 miles away from some of the main rice plantations. I just spent the night on Tuesday at Annandale Plantation in what used to be the big house, but then became the doctor's house, where they did surgery on enslaved African people. So I have a whole bunch of Get Out themed pictures, if y'all remember those, turned up times 10.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. But what speaks to me specifically is that, our culture here is unique, it's locally specific, but it's at the same time ancient and African.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, I always say, when I started studying, Malcolm X was like one of my main people I studied in undergrad. And I got introduced to the Malcolm X grassroots movement. But I was like, why y'all call yourselves New Africans? We ain't no New Africans, we are Africans. Africans. And that means that we're not necessarily from just one ethnic group, but a cross-fertilization of Yoruba, Mende, Akan, Bakongo, Igbo people. If there's anybody, like Pan-Africanism is literally in our cultural DNA. And then, of course, cross-fertilized with what the Native American folks we meet here. So to me, what stands out to me is, it's like, wow, I feel comfortable in like my Africanity, and I see the beauty of Black people in this local space, but also, to me, it's timeless as well.
Wow. Wow. The title is From Bill to Bourbon Street.
Deep Down in the Mississippi Delta is a full title with that.
Deep down in the Mississippi Delta. Why that title?
Because I grew up an hour from Memphis, and so when I first started the show as an artist and trying to get my work out, it was in Memphis was the big city, and you know, with my paternal side of the family being in Louisiana, it just always, I've had that title in my head, the first part, from Bill to Bourbon in my head for probably 8 to 10 years, and you know, just as a title. But I wanted to give it even more context. So from Bill to Bourbon, deep down in Mississippi Delta. So, you know, a lot of these stories are rural stories. It's not even the big city of Memphis or the big city, what would be Jacksonville or New Orleans. Like these are, you know, this country folk, like in, you know, I mean, townships. And one of the pieces up here entitled Pastures, I've got my maternal grandfather was a mechanic. You know, he worked in Terrell, Arkansas, which might have been a population of 1,500, 2,000 people. A lot of the photographs and a lot of the visuals, you know, they're set to like Juke Joints in rural cities, because that's kind of where, you know, I feel like that story is best told, or where it's, you know, really rooted in. And again, coming from somewhere, you know, coming from where I'm from, at 13,000 people, that's a small, you got 13,000 cars on the highway right now here in Atlanta.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's real small. So that's, it's just paying homage to like where I come from, because there's really a mix culturally. Like in Memphis, they're known for the blues. In New Orleans, they're known for jazz, right? And I think because I cover, you know, both of those genres within the bodies of work that I do, that really reflect it, I just thought it made sense. And then throwing in the deep down in the Mississippi Delta, they give it some context of like these are rural communities in the rural South.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this question is for both of you. Okay, so right here smack in the middle, we have a juke joint. And growing up, I will admit, I heard about juke joints. Obviously, I've never been in one because I grew up in Los Angeles, but heard stories from people in my family.
Sure? You didn't go to a juke joint?
No, I'm positive, never been. Never, ever have been. Red talked about it. In fact, there's a story that my aunt tells in the back of their house. So when my aunt and my dad is the youngest of three, and they were probably under 7, and there's a juke joint at the back of their house, and of course little kids, they want to go and see what's going on, and so they would sneak back there to see what was going on and like get in trouble from that. For the two of you, talk to me about the symbolism of a juke joint and its place in the culture of African American history, culture, and just spaces of joy.
Yeah. Sister Bashar, where is she? Did I say? So, Bashir, I'm sorry. We were talking about, you know, just the importance of these spaces. And for me, growing up, we had 2 juke joints. And
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had 4 churches and 2 juke joints.
That sounds like a good balance. That sounds like a good balance.
One was called the Glass House. That's what I was talking about. And you wouldn't think it was pitch black, painted black, but on the inside, all the walls were mirrored. And it was really a pool hall, and then there was a jukebox. And I don't think they ever brought live music, but it was just a place where you could go and play whatever song. If you didn't have the record for Sugar Hill Gang, you could go and play that, you know, there. But it was a place of community that was, I won't say just as much as the church, because the church was more important. But it was a space where you could go and have a good time, and especially once you became a teenager, It's like, oh, you visited other people's juke joints. Small community. I grew up in North Santee, and I couldn't date anybody in that community because it's like you might be dating your cousin. Like, oh, so we had to go to other communities, juke joints, and really, have a good time. So it was a space of like kind of like learning my place. I don't have a lot of social graces, but if I have any kind of, just comfort with just being with our people in an artistic setting, it's because of Paradise Club in Chapee in Georgetown, South Carolina, which is in the PD part of the Gullah Geechee corridor versus the Santee Delta. So I grew up on the Delta as well. But Santee Delta, the biggest delta on the eastern seaboard, is to me dwarfed by the Mississippi Delta, but it's still very, very important though. So those juke joints, were like very important places though. Wow. The other one was Long Branch. I said we had two, Glass House and Long Branch, and they're like both, you could throw a rock from one to the other.
What was the name of the four churches? You remember the churches?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so my mom, I called you an evangelist of the Black art in America. My mother, her name is, or was, Evangelist Shirley Barr Livingston. She was an evangelist. She grew up in the AME church. Her father, my grandfather, maternal, Reverend Sam Barr, he pastored Gethsemane Baptist Church in Sampit, neighboring community. Mount Zion AME is the church where we spend most of our time. And in all honesty, that was like a juke joint too.
That was going to be my next question. Y'all know that, right?
I tell you, the church that we spent most of our time, it was a small Pentecostal church called St. Luke Church of God in Christ.
Oh, yeah.
My dad was a jackleg Pentecostal minister. The whole church could fit, like, y'all right there, this is like more people than we ever had in our church. But that place used to be rocking. Yeah, it used to be rocking. So it was a place of rhythm, a place of music. It wasn't like, you just came to hear a sermon, even though my dad could preach the paint off walls. I mean, he was like really a very good storyteller. And I don't know if we're gonna get into sinners, but I really identify with Sammy. Because
wait, don't go there yet. Don't go there yet. No. Let's stay. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Okay.
Yeah.
Juke joint.
So I think oftentimes I create in a space to present things that I haven't often taken advantage of or had experience of. And so for me, the juke joint is really like bar culture. And while of course I'm old enough and I've gone to some bars, the closest thing I came to hanging out in spaces like that, at one time I used to have this addiction to gambling. And there was a gambling hole that I frequented that's just like that juke joint, and without the theme, without having like the music going, they had all the people there, the drinks and, the hang out and the gambling and all that stuff. Because originally when I put that installation together, I envisioned, bar in the front, gambling in the back, was kind of what I was initially thinking. And because I wrote a piece called RD's Back Room, and I would love to perform it at some point throughout the run of the show. But even, so when I talk about, even when you look at the way that I address the men in dandyism, so like I'm projecting myself in that style. It's hard for a big brother to find some jazzy clothes. I'm telling you, up until I, found these Robert Graham shirts, I couldn't find nothing jazzy. So like so this is me, projecting myself also in how I'm seeing these brothers dress. And so I would say the same thing with the juke joint. And then also, again, stories untold or stories forgotten. So even though, I didn't frequent them like some may have frequented, it's part of our culture, and I want to give light to that culture that existed in the areas of interest to me and where my storyline goes.
Actually, let me see. I said I've never been in one. Oh, but then as you were talking, I was like, oh, okay. Growing up in South Central Los Angeles, at the end of the block, there was a bar. I wasn't allowed to go into that bar, but the adults in my family, certain adults would go into the bar, and there was lots of things that were happening there. And so as kids, we want to know what those things were. And there were some very controversial things that happened in the context of my family in that bar. And it was almost like this rites of passage. And then my grandparents would always be like, trying to keep my brother and I, and like the younger generation of kids away from that space. But it's the same space.
Well, I don't know if I believe it. Well, no, because I was going to say, like, you know, she says she's never been, but she pointed out, like, shouldn't there be some Mad Dog 2020 in that Juke Joint? and some Thunderbird, you know what I'm saying? Like, how did Ife know about that?
Right. Wait, when I saw the exhibit, I was like, you kind of high on the hog. He got some Crown Royal over there. I'm like, no. The folks that I was seeing, and it was before. I mean, so these are the folks that wasn't in the bar. So yes, it was definitely Night Train, Thunderbird, Mad Dog 2020, OE. Like, it was a particular way that folks were drinking. And so even as I say that and y'all laugh, y'all know, you can understand when my grandma was like, that's not a place for y'all.
Right. Yeah. Just real quick too, my partner in life is here, Dr. Corey Claiborne. Thank you for being here. She knows I'll tell some of these stories. She'll be like, don't tell this one. So, all right, so the Glass House, I will say this. Juke Joints were places for grown-up revelry. But there was also a space where it's almost like you put your training wheels for how to actually learn to imbibe. And, you know, so like the guy who ran it, Teddy Wineglass, blessed dead, he wouldn't sell you certain things. Like, you know, if like your parents sent for something, then he would sell that. But if my parents weren't drinking like private stock 40 ounces in, you know, Old English or, you know, Mad Dog or Blue Bull or whatever, they, like, that ain't for your mama. You drinking this, right? So he was like, no. But I also remember the art in the Glass House. The first time I saw the Great Kings of Africa series by Budweiser was in the Glass House. And I could still, we were talking about this earlier, I just remember how this was like a place where you were kind of getting a little toe tap into your history and culture as well.
Got it.
Interesting.
That actually makes sense because I don't know if any of y'all had this experience. We used to get sent to the store with a note for cigarettes. And they could always tell, like, if it was my auntie sending the note, like, you couldn't actually go and try to scribble a note because the people wouldn't sell it to you. No. They knew if it was your aunt or if you were just trying to play games. And so it's, to me, a very different kind of cultural experience. And I'm always, like, amazed that we were able to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, and the contrast. So we had what we call the white man store.
Wait, the white man store?
The white man store. This wasn't the Buckra. We were past the Buckra store, but the white man store.
You have to say what Buckra is.
Oh, Buckra is Gullah Geechee for white man. For white man from Mandinka, I want to say is Wolof too. But the Buckra, they will sell you anything. They will sell you anything. And that's when I had a drinking problem in high school. And it was leading me to where I was not going to be a college professor. I was going to be something else. I don't know what. But they would sell you anything and everything. And let me stop. One of my cousins died hanging around these guys, eaten by alligators. Yeah. But I'll stop right there. But there was a different ethos. I'm saying is the value system of the Glass House. You know, that was they protected you. You went there.
I had the same. I had a similar experience. Like when I talk about my gambling addiction at RD spot. When I was a kid, you know, I was going to Kojic with my auntie, you know, Church of God in Christ. But I used to go there and buy candy. Like he would sell like, you know, candies and stuff like that. But I never knew as a kid, like they were gambling. That's the spot. That was a gambling hole. So, you know, it just speaks to, you know, looking out, community still looking out.
Yeah, the things that can happen and could not happen. But speaking of Buckra and the white man store, that makes me think of a particular scene in Sinners. As we look at this exhibit and think about, I want to bring in the hoodoo element. There is right there. What's the name of this?
Black Bottom Blues.
So this, yes, thank you. this painting right here, it's at a crossroads. And every single one of us has been at the crossroads. as decisions that we've had to make in our lives, you know, where it's like, okay, you can go this way, or you can, you know, go this other way. And there may be, I mean, with any decision you make, there's going to be consequences. What I think is interesting is the man that is sitting there at the crossroads. Talk a little bit about who that man is, Najee, and then Dr. Livingston, I want you to come in and respond to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so at that particular scene, you know, it's two brothers approaching the crossroads, and you got Papa Legba there at the crossroads holding the lantern. And, you know, I'm no scholar in this field, that's why we got these great educators here, but, you know, Papa Legba is the intersector between the spiritual world and the human world. And, you know, I got the cotton fields and the juke joint in the back, and these two young musicians, one a little older than the other, and then fireflies in the foreground. You want to pull it up?
Yeah, pull it down so people can see.
Oh, okay.
Keep talking.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what it is. So it's Papa Legba at the crossroads, and just, you know, drawing on the culture and the history. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's something, if you don't mind, and it's not specific to this painting, but in Gullah Geechee culture, sometimes we try to downplay the significance of what, I don't know if Papa Legba is the Vodun version, or no?
It can be, but yeah.
There's a Haitian connection to Gullah Geechee culture that quite often we don't deal with. And I'm saying that, you know, we're working on a book. Dr. Ojelade is writing a chapter, that Claiborne is writing a chapter. Yours on when we go low, when they go low, we go high. Well, we conjure. How you say it?
when they go low, we go, no, yeah, when they go low, we conjure root work, magic, and ancestral reverence.
But there's such a strong element, because we actually have historic connections to Haiti. And like those first 100 Africans brought to the U.S. in 1526 came through Haiti after spending a generation. There was a generation of cultural development there. But when you go to Haiti on the north coast and Cap Haitian, one of the depictions I see of the Bois Cayman ceremony that led to the Haitian Revolution, that was kicked off the Haitian Revolution, is depicted. It looks just like a ring shout. People are dressed in white.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They're marching in a counterclockwise circle. Their feet are not crossing. Folks are keeping rhythm inside and out. And it's important to think about how, with Sterling Stuckey and other scholars like Michael Gomez, they said that the ring shout were those rituals that actually helped to meld us into African people. As you know, coming from Mandinka, Wolof, Yoruba, Igbo cultures, and then becoming African people in Haiti and then in the Low Country. That's why I say I don't call myself a new African. I can say African American, but at root, the cultural content of who I am is African. Is not black. I'm black, but black does not speak to that cultural mixture dominated by African cultures that we see, to me, that resonate when I feel these rhythms of what's kicking off in these paintings and this whole space in a way.
And so we can think about kind of that Papa Legba or Eshu in Yoruba culture. He would be called, if you think of Burr Rabbit stories, it's the trickster element, the Nancy stories from the Khan traditions that also show up in Jamaica. It's that same kind of character, like to stand at the crossroads and you got to make a decision on where you're going to go. And regardless of what decision you make, we know that there are going to be consequences, and they could be good consequences, they could be negative. Where did you see, let's tie this into the Sinners movie specifically, where did you see that Eshu element show up? I have a particular idea, but go ahead.
Okay, so the movie, once Sammy sets out on his day, gets up early, picks his cotton, which probably couple of 100 pounds or something of cotton that they had to meet a quota. He's picked up by Smoke and Stack, or by Stack, right? Help me out.
I don't know.
The
A and B.
brother who's
The
wearing
twins.
okay, Smoke and Stack. So by the hell-raising brother, and then the business. So Smoke is the businessman. Stack, I think, is more fiery. To me, that's Eshu Alegba, the red and blue hat. The red and blue hat is actually one character, but split into two different
I like that.
beings.
I like that.
When Stack picks him up, they are driving and they go to the crossroads. They're driving past the crossroads, and if y'all notice, 3 buzzards are flying in a circle, a counterclockwise circle over the crossroads.
I missed that.
It stood out. I was like, he is like sending all kind of smoke signals at me up in this joint.
It's
You might as well throw a hat up in the air. But the buzzard being very, very important as another animal that is a guide from this world to the next. And you hear about the king buzzard stories being very, very important in Gullah Geechee culture, and they're tying into Igbo, Yoruba. Plus, the buzzard, that's what's watching over the pharaohs. There's the Ajo and Buto. Buto is the cobra, and Ajo is the buzzard. So that's, to me, the Crossroads is all throughout that movie. It's really showing up. It's very strong, and that's not the only one too. There are other examples. There are buzzards flying over the house when Remick goes up to the first white couple as a sign of death. But in the case of the Africans in the film, those buzzards represent something else is happening. There's a gathering of forces that is happening over this crossroads where Sammy, and then where they pick up Big Boy. He kind of wait a minute.
In the field.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? We met in Miami. We met in Miami doing Art Basel. We took a picture together. Yeah, Omar.
Oh, what's his name?
Omar. Benton. Omar.
Okay. But the guy who's
Miller?
the big guy.
Yeah.
At the door. He's in a lot of stuff. He's but Omar C. Okay. So but they, they're coming together. Sammy, Stack, if I have that right, and then Big Boy. I'm just gonna call him Big Boy because that's not like what we would call him. But yeah, so it's there. The Crossroads is very strong.
Okay.
So I mean, I can't recall the scene quite that in depth, but while you were talking, Dr. Livingston, and talking about the buzzard, it's just like, it just struck me because I got a piece. I don't know if y'all do a Google search for Najee Dorsey Conjure Woman, right? And just do a quick Google search on your phone. It's like I'm picking up on stuff that has a lot of intentionalities for, like if you know the history, but I didn't do the research. Like in my Conjure Woman, I've done 2 versions. And both of them I use a vulture, turkey vulture. In both pieces. And so when you talk about that history, it's like, man, I'm like, so it's just, it's coming through. Like even in like the fireflies that I use in my work, I was doing, like I asked Chat, like what's the cultural significance for the diaspora with fireflies? And I was just using it. Well, actually, this is the whole piece right here.
Okay, okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but I was just using it, but it talked about how fireflies, for many cultures, represent the ancestors, and also the, how fading light, life can be for us symbolically, So anyway, it's just. Yeah, anyway, I'm just,
No, I think what you're saying is so important because let's put a name to it. It's ancestral memory. And I think it's important for us to specifically name it because it is a straight up African retention. I grew up in an interesting situation, and so I didn't have someone that directly taught me how to cook. I have memories of my grandmothers who were both excellent cooks doing particular things, but I got no instruction. I am a cook, and I cook from ancestral memory. And the more that I understand my family now, not only, because I actually grew up thinking that all black women could cook. Because of the situation I had, y'all laugh. And I literally thought that that was the case. And then I realized like, oh, that's not actually true. And so what my daughter calls what I can do is ancestral magic. So when I'm showing up in the kitchen, I'm remembering stuff. I'm not hearing voices, but I am getting specific instruction. I see people shaking their heads, so you know what I mean. I'm getting very specific instruction. Try this, do this. I mean, I make dishes that it wasn't part of the cuisine that we ate when I was younger, but somebody is telling me that this is what I want you to make. And then as I have done all this ancestral and genealogical research on my family, I didn't know that my grandfather on my mother's side, my mother's father, because he died when I was a little girl, that he was actually a chef and he taught other black male chefs. Had no idea. I knew of my grandfather as an electrician. And then when I look on both sides of my family, I come from this lineage of chefs. And so when you're talking about the fact that you're just doing something, if y'all see the picture, I see people looking on their phones, so hopefully you're seeing this picture of the Conjure Woman. I think it's important as artists that you recognize that it is ancestral memory that is happening. That you're pulling up stuff and you're drawing stuff and you don't know why, or you're painting stuff, or you're putting stuff together in a particular way. But that is because that's spirit talking to us. And I would say from a psychological perspective that is revolutionary, that our ancestors don't allow us to forget, that we absolutely remember.
And I embrace that. I just never use that, I'm gonna be more intentional by calling it that.
Yeah.
Can I share something just to that
go
point?
ahead.
And we have stories about where our people came from. Like a lot of Gullah Geechee people do, a lot of folks, Louisiana, other parts have stories. Shout out to Tamara Lanier, who successfully got her great grandfather Renty. I forgot the.
That's what I was talking about.
Got her and Delia. Sorry. Got their photos back from Harvard. Absolutely. But so just in this, like, our ancestors really speak and across a long period of time. In fact, I don't think there's any kind of limit. Okay. I've been kind of like really attracted to ancient Egyptian culture since I was like 3 or 4 years old. Y'all know where this is going. I did my DNA testing first with a white company, 23andMe, and they said, oh, your mother's people, Mozabite Berbers just outside of Timbuktu. My great-great-grandmother passed down the story that our people came from Timbuktu. Dead on. My father's people, different story. Because I have a biological father and my legal father. Biologically, we did the test with African Ancestry, the best company for, with black DNA, black ancestry, genetic ancestry. And they said Mbenzele people out of Congo and Cameroon. Now the Mbenzele are short musical people who are forest folks. In Congo they call them Bachwa or the Mbuti people, and other parts they call. So, but the ancient Egyptians, for them, those short Africans, they call it Denk. In ancient Egyptian they call it Denk. That's my graduate language in grad school as well. Me, Greg Card, a lot of other folks, but I was connected, drawn to this thing. For them, they saw those short people as culturally significant. And every now and then you had to make sure that they were in the country so they could do what they call the dance of the gods.
Interesting.
And for them, the gods are their ancestors especially. So there's something there. Plus, there's other messages we've been getting about that from a long time. But the ancestors always speak.
That's powerful.
Very clearly and consistently.
Consistently, definitely consistently. I want to go back to Sinners. I saw Daryl. Okay, wait a minute. Let me acknowledge something. I didn't get through the whole movie. I don't do horror. And it was a lot. And so when the Chinese woman said, come on in, I was like, I'm gone. put my purse on my shoulder. I was like, I'm out, y'all. Couldn't do it. So my daughter did catch me up on what happened, but it was a lot. And I'm gonna blame Dontanarius for me even going to see it, because I was not going to see it. And he called me and was like, oh, we want you to come and do this. And I was like, all right, let me go and see this movie. So, but I think there was some good stuff in there. And so Delroy Lindo's character reminds me, obviously, of people in my family. And I saw him as somewhat of an issue also. Particularly at the scene, like he's drinking throughout the movie, and then boom, has this moment of clarity when danger is on. And so I'm wondering, the two of you, what are your thoughts about his character in particular?
Oh my goodness. I'll let you go first, Najee.
Man, I hope you take it.
Well, so, I asked the question, this is like in February, we had this big event called the New Scramble for Africa. And Malcolm X and all these folks. And we opened and we said, how many Africans in the house? Like 500 people in the audience. And it was like 10 people raised their hand. I was like, I see all these black people. I'm like, so where are the rest of y'all? Delroy Lindo, and I should say Ryan Coogler, channeling a lot of his family history from Mississippi, his Uncle James, his Aunt Sammy, and all his. He said it when Sammy started singing the song, I lied to you, said it, and he we he's singing the song, and then Delroy Lindo is flashing back to where he says, we weren't forced to convert to this. Like with Christianity, we weren't forced to convert. We'll talk about that a whole other time, Dr. Claiborne. We all have that conversation about whether Christianity is an African religion. Yes and no, but we'll talk about that another time. Delroy Lindo was clear, the character, and y'all can help me out with his name.
I don't remember.
But he says, we brought this from home.
Yes.
And put an extra stamp on it. It was like, that's not from Mississippi. That's not from the slave ship. That's not from the Atlantic.
We brought it from home.
From home.
Yeah.
We brought this from home.
Yeah.
Different story, 1619, they saying we're born on the waters. Yeah, okay, metaphorically, sure, but what's home?
Yeah.
That space is, I think that's very important. So I think he's very clear too. I like how you said that moment of clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It actually reminds me of, and I'm not going to be able to say the quote, but Frederick Douglass talking about that. He didn't have anything wrong, basically. He didn't see anything wrong with Jesus or even Christianity, even though he didn't call himself a Christian. He was like, but this Christianity that these white people are doing, I don't understand that.
Right, yeah.
It was a different thing. And as someone that grew up in Los Angeles that did not grow up in the church, living in the South, I realized like, oh, this is actually two different things that's occurring here. They're not the same at all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't want to monopolize too much time. Just real quick too, Fannie Liu Hamer. If y'all go back and watch her documentary, it's on PBS, but she has this opening quote where she says, I can forgive a lot of things, but for the 40 million of my ancestors who were taken and destroyed in the slave ships of Africa, and the fact that they took my name, and the documentary is My Name is Fannie Liu Hamer. I think I want to say that's it. But she repeats that, my name is. She says, for taking my name, I can't forgive that.
Oh, sure.
I cannot forgive that. That's something, that's an extra piece. And that's, of what, in terms of our reparative and healing work, is recovering our name. And our names and our ancestry. So to me, Sinners he's doing it. Ryan Coogler.
He's doing it.
Yeah.
He's making it happen.
Yes.
Before we open up for questions, I have another question. Okay, so I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a business owner, and this is a business. And I do think it is important to say the work is for sale. Just in case y'all did not hear me, the work is for sale. And they will work with you. Talk to me about the importance of us as African Americans or people of African descent, I don't want to assume everybody's an African American because, you know, we come from the diaspora, of us purchasing fine art, of us purchasing this beautiful, here comes the champ, it's $28,000. So some people may be thinking like, oh my gosh, you know, that's a car. But what's the significant in terms of an investment in fine art, and particularly Black fine art?
So it's gonna force me to put on my dealer hat.
Yeah,
Right.
Come on now.
Yeah. So I mean, we artists, but artist, art dealer, collector. Satiri and I've been collecting for a long time. The market for African American art has been growing for decades. Many would argue up until this last, say, 12, 14 months, that the art market, since art market is on the rise, that African American art and art of the diaspora is some of the hottest art that you can acquire. The history of collecting art goes back, a really good ways, but really took off, I would argue, in like the 70s and 80s. It started to pick up with the Cosby Show and starting to see art on the walls, and then next thing you know, we had the different festivals. The National Black Art Festival was a big one, but the main one that that really was the creme de la creme was the National Black Fine Art Show up in New York that was held at the Puck Building, where you had a lot of the prominent galleries in the States and abroad that would come and share works by the legacy artists and the contemporary artists of the time. Living with art has added a lot of value to just our everyday life, right? But there's a market side to art, and oftentimes I'm going to say that you don't always have to get caught up in the market's driven side of art to enjoy art and have art in your life. So let's start with that. But for those who are interested in art as an asset, our gallery and other galleries around the country present work that we're working to add value to. And we add value by presenting the work on the walls, by getting writing and scholarship on the work, taking it to the fairs, talking with collectors about it, talking with institutions about that material. And hopefully over a period of time, as the artist hopefully continues to grow in their craft and they sell work at a particular price point in this year, that as their career grows and as their prominence grows and as the opportunities continue to expand, those prices increase over time, right? And the beauty is we have evidence of art that was bought 5, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, being sold at auction, being sold on the secondary market of prices, that are tremendous. I gave a talk not too long ago of works that were bought in the 70s by like Barclay Hendricks and for $1,200, which was, the equivalent of $11,000 today. But there's auction records of works in 2017 of $900,000 and in 2019 and 2021 of $1.2 and $3 million. And that's going back to the end, but you've got contemporary examples, and I often talk about an artist like a Amy Sherrill, who in 2015, her works were selling between 8,000 to 9,000. And now there's auction records of over 3 million, right? And there are factors that take place in any artist's career that, lends itself to the market, absorbing and wanting that work and coveting that work. When I first, and to bring it home, when I first moved to Atlanta 20 years ago, Satiri and I, the most I had ever sold a piece for was $2,500, right? And over time, I'm not commanding 6 figures yet, but over time, that value proposition has changed because of the longevity that I've had in my career, the growth that my work has had, the museums that have collected my work and shown my work, the collectors, the hundreds and hundreds of collectors that have supported, my journey, and so like the evidence of where my work has grown over the last 20 years is there, and the same for so many other artists too, and the same for so many other galleries. There are no guarantees that when you decide to sell something, 5, 10 years from now, that you may find a willing buyer, but chances are if you acquire wonderful works that you're going to enjoy, you know, there's a value that's there for living with that work. And you stand the chance that if you collect enough work that you may find, you may have 1 or 2 gems in there that the market is going to covet that may make up for the work that you bought and then some. I work with collectors who recently I've had a couple recent highs. Black Art in America, we're celebrating the 1st of May. This is our 15th year as a company, right? Appreciate it. We're really unique in the market. We work with collectors on the primary market and on the secondary market. This past year, I had my high. You know, we all have goals. One of my goals was to finally have a 6-figure sale for a single piece. Last year, I had my first piece that I sold for a client who inherited a piece from her mother that she got in the 70s that sold for $175,000. I helped her realize that value, right? I helped another collector recently in the last month sell a piece for $130,000, one single piece. Now, while that sounds great, understand the art market, that piece is selling for millions, you know, and hopefully one day, you know, that one-time goal of 6 figures is now 7 figures. And I'll be able to help a client realize that at some point. But it's fluid. And while the market in general may be down some, but it's art as an asset is a real thing, you know, and collecting art and living with art and supporting artists is a real thing too, right? So if you're in it for the money or if you're in it for the joy and the impact that you can have with supporting artists in your community or supporting artists that align with your value, you know, all of that has meaning. So that's all. That's what I'm gonna say to that right there. Okay. The work is for sale. You know, support your brother. And I would say this in closing. Understand, and one of the things I've talked about is how when you give your resources to causes or to individuals, it's nice to see what they do with it, right? Black Art in America exists because I've been a successful artist, and Satiri and I as a couple have reinvested that success into elevating and expanding in what we do as a company. So if you buy anything from this show, just know you're doing something extra special because you're supporting the founder, you're supporting the artist, and you're supporting the family that at the end of the day, you know, once we get past the food and paying the bills and something like that, the money goes back into doing stuff like this and building on to the black visual culture that we're a part of. Benny Andrews used to always talk about how we're all but a cog in the wheel, you know, working to move our culture forward. So.
Okay, I gotta push it a little bit more because
Okay.
there's somebody in this audience that is looking at one of these pieces and they're looking at the price and they don't think they can afford it.
Oh.
Because wait a minute, hold on.
Go ahead.
Because I have been in that position where I looked at something and I was like, I don't think I can do it. For that person, how do they start? What's the conversation they have? Because they're embarrassed. They don't want to come and tell you that they can't afford it. So how does that start?
So understand, like we doing a payment, the old-fashioned layaway.
Like
We
Kmart, you remember that?
Yeah, so we do
installments.
We do installments, and really like there's something for everybody. I mean, we got work at various price points in here, but we do installments. Particularly in my work, I can do a little longer of an installment if needed. You know, so but the work is accessible from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I think that's important to say because I know here. I bought 2 on installment, and you know, just having that conversation, like being able to say, like, I don't have this kind of money right now, but I really want this piece, can be uncomfortable, and so I always want to make people know, let people know that you can't have that conversation.
And it's really like a bee sting, right? You just feel it for a minute, but you get a lifetime of enjoyment from it, right? I mean, you only feel it for a minute because I'm gonna take.
It's longer than a minute, but anyway.
And I'm just gonna give you this one example. When the first big piece, prior to moving to Atlanta, the most Satiri and I ever spent for a piece was $800. We was in Chicago, and I saw this big piece, beautiful piece by Nani De Silva for $2,500. I was like, man, I ain't never spent that kind of money on no art, right? Your tolerance level changes the more you engage with it. And so the realization that I came up to at that point was that we ain't never missed no meals, right? We've never gone without. And my old gallerist, Miss Nicole in Chicago, used to always talk about when we transact with each other and supporting the arts, it's a blessing. That blessing goes to the artist, but also you receive a blessing too, because you're putting goodwill and energy into supporting something that elevates us, elevate our culture. You're not going to go without. We'll make sure to work with you on your payment plan should you need it.
Okay, I want to open this up for questions. Right there.
So I want you to speak a little bit about the Juke Joint, if you can, a little bit more, because I saw Ma Rainey in there. And,
Okay.
And then one of the things back to the church Juke Joint conversation, so many people who, like Sister Rosetta Tharpe, all these people, they did both. And maybe you could say something about the exhibit, but then if anybody wants to comment on the...
I think that's important.
Yeah, so I could definitely talk about that piece in the center of the Juke Joint. It's titled Liberty Legends. When I had my first solo show at the Columbus Museum in Columbus, Georgia, they asked me to tackle a bit of Columbus history. And for those that don't know, Ma Rainey, the famous blues musician, is from Columbus, Georgia, right? So that piece Liberty Legends is an interpretive piece based on the history of the musicians that came and performed in Columbus. So it's Ma Rainey hosting Louis Armstrong, Marian Anderson, Nat King Cole, and Duke Ellington in the Juke Joint. So that's what inspired the piece. Is titled Liberty Legends. Liberty District was the black district in Columbus.
The photo collage, I believe that's what you call it?
Photo montage.
Photo montage. I see that increasing in popularity. Does it hold its value compared to oils on acrylics and canvas and things like that? And also, this style of painting here is also increasing in popularity. It's featured on a lot of shows like Forever. I'm not sure if you all have watched that series, but lots of beautiful black art, primarily by California artists. But you can't differentiate who the artist is because so many artists are, signing on to that style of like the blue-black silhouette.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That figure, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So does that kind of take the value away, in your opinion, when it becomes so commercialized?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So what I would say based on the photo montage work to start, the value comes in the artist and the artist's career and where they're positioned in the marketplace. Right. So, and what I do in photo montage is going to be different. Like, there's a lot of people that cook, shrimp and cook rice, but they ain't making gumbo. You know what I mean? And so it's, if you look at the work that I do, it's not only about technique, it's also about storytelling. There's a uniqueness that you're going to find in the processes that I'm doing with my photo montage that's going to be different than anybody else is on the market. And again, people, so they're buying a Najee when they buy my work. The other thing that gives it value is not only my career as an artist, and again, what I mentioned about the collectors that have bought my work, the articles that's been written up on my work, the museums that my work is in, but the fact I work for you to have value by limiting the work to an addition of 10, So, there's not 100 of these out there in the marketplace. There's only 10, and there'll be a few artist proofs. Now, speaking to black portraiture has really been popular for the last decade or so, and there's a lot of people doing it. And we all have our various reasons why we handle the figure in a particular way. I would argue if you look at that piece the title of that piece is Return to Eden, and so the area around the piece is as much telling a story that presents the uniqueness of what I do within black portraiture. And so like if you look at that work and you see like the landscape, the way I do my landscapes is completely different. The series is Return to Eden is a series that I do. And so again, at the end of the day, it boils down to the artist, the individual artist and their career and their trajectory is where the value proposition lies.
Could you talk about the dance scene in Sinners, what the significance of that?
Why y'all looking at me?
I'm sure what
I did see the dance.
All right.
No. I told you I got to that. The lady said, "Come on in," and I was like, I was done. So, say it again. No, I did see it.
No, she did.
I did. I absolutely did see that part. I mean, I don't want to, and I listen. I actually listened to several interviews with Ryan Coogler because I was very intrigued. And that part I think is powerful. And let me talk about it from a California perspective, because Dr. Claiborne and I are part of a live stream that we do once a month, and we were talking about it, and I saw some of the things that he did, I was like, I could tell that he did that because he grew up in California. And the choice to do that dancing and make those African connections to show, particularly I love the part where you see the, what are they calling the dances that the young girls do now with the behind? Twerking, thank you, sorry. My stuff don't do all of that, but the twerking and then showing like the African connections, I think it's really important to be able to make those connections, because a lot of the things that we see now and we sexualize is really coming from a European perspective of the dances that are traditional in these different African cultures that our ancestors have come from. And so I think that Ryan Coogler is specifically making the statement that we are African people, that these things are important and significant, and that we need to recognize it's an African connection and not bastardize it, if you will, number one. But number two, I also thought it was powerful for him to make the connection with the Chinese woman and showing her ancestral tradition there. And I was like, yeah, that's a straight California piece there. And then even I saw one interview with the Chinese folks where the specific dialect of Chinese that they were speaking was a dialect that has traditionally been in the Mississippi Delta area. And I thought that was important. So there's very significant things that were happening, and that scene is one of them. So thank you for that question. Other questions? I see a couple over here.
This is for Najee. I noticed you're doing some sculptures now, and the heads that you have. When did you start that, and what prompted you to explore the ceramics that you're doing besides the painting?
Yeah, so the sculptures actually, so Satira and I's first gallery was in our hometown back in like '96, a little 200 square foot space. I've been doing sculpture. There's a lot that I was doing even before I moved to Atlanta 20 years ago. I mean, I was an artist in the small town, just making stuff, making art, you know. I've got one of my early pieces is titled, I think it's part of my 40 Acres in a Mural, the one with the sandstone. So some of the early sculptures that I did was actually using industrial sandstone, like what Mr. Imagination or Lonnie Holly is currently using. Najar, who was my mentor coming out of high school, introduced me to it because he learned it from Mr. Imagination, a workshop Mr. Imagination did. So today, I really think like the sculptures is like one of the more natural mediums that I do, because I can do them so effortlessly, you know, and I'm not trying to capture individuals. I'm capturing like feelings and moods and personalities. Like I think my sculptures are really more focused on just like these personalities, these particular characters, and they just kind of fit. And I like I work with air dry clay, so it dries white, even though you got these black features. I mean, I really like the contrast between the two. And from time to time, I may paint them. So, but the sculptures, I've been doing sculptures. I first started to do sculptures and sculptures back when I was in Arkansas in the '90s, but I also did assemblage works, and I did all kind of stuff. The market would have you supposedly focus in one area. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's problematic, because as creators, we should be getting it all out, you know, across multiple mediums and every form of expression. I think everything that we do, even this space, before you go out, look at what this space looked like before we bought it. You know, I tell people this is my largest art project to date, was visualizing the experience that I wanted people to have here. So it's all intentional. So everything that we do is art, you know? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this venue. My question is, how do you know, this is for you, Najee, when you are finished with the art piece?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I just,
How do you know when you're
just looking at
finished?
the one behind you, you know, does the ancestor drop the brush or? I want to know spiritually what happens.
I like that.
Take it to the spiritual level for me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess only thing I can give you is what's authentic, and what I would say is when I feel like I've given it everything I have to give it, and it's giving me back like I'm ready. You know, I know when it's finished. You know, and you know, Dantaneris, who's been with me the longest here, Soteria, I tell him all the time, I can tell when I'm 40% in, or 80% in, or 95% in. Like I've got a landscape in there right now that I feel like I'm just about there. I'm like 98% there, but it's still just a couple. It might just take a couple, 2-3 strokes, maybe one little piece here, and then I know I'm finished. So I can't really go to, you know, like this, you know, space that I can't really speak of. It's innate. It's kind of like, you know, finding a loved one, you know, like, you know, loving on your loved one, you know, it's finished when it's finished, you know. I mean, I don't know.
As you're saying that, what it reminds me of is like when you watching somebody cooking, you're like, that's not enough salt. Like you gotta put some garlic in there. Like you know it's not done, right? You ain't tasted it. You just look and you know it's not done.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing.
Yeah.
Dr. Livingston, I want to go back to you really quick because I'm sorry, Sam. Okay.
I know I was gonna say, Dr. Livingston.
You didn't answer Dr. Claiborne's the second part of her question about like the interplay between the Juke Joint and the church. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm like thinking, this is my assumption that the same people that are playing at church are the same people that are playing in the Juke Joint.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's what it seems like. Even though I didn't grow up in like a live music juke joint type of setting, but we had some great musicians, and they all played in the church. But it's from my Uncle Saul, my mother's maternal uncle, who passed down the guitar, that I started playing the guitar. And the first music that I was drawn to was the blues. And, you know, everybody's like, you know, you will never play in the church, right? I was like, no, I don't plan on it. But at the same time, I grew up a preacher's kid. And what I love about the movie was that Sammy knows the Bible. He knows the Bible. He knows the Bible, you know, that little snippet, but that kind of indicates that he's been training in that. And I loved how the movie shows the struggle with Christianity as imposed, even though it has roots in Africa, and showing that we all have to raise these questions about how we're going to live our authentic selves and how we're going to present our authentic selves, whether it's in our art or our work, our writing. I see a couple of my students, former students here, Brother Dorsey, Brother Bay. Where you at? Oh, you okay. For Morehouse, and I have to say too, Morehouse really needs the spirit of what you're doing here visually to grace our walls, because we need our students to be triggered by this ancestral memory.
Yeah.
And because we're really kind of drifting too much away from like our traditional mission of producing people who are trying to change this world toward the positive. And we live in an anti-truth world right now. So, but just to say that I think a part of my truth, like I grew up, my father was a minister, my mom was an evangelist, my grandfather was a Baptist minister, but he was also an herbal healer. I won't say a root doctor, because he would never call himself a root doctor, but he had his shed in the back, and folks from all over the little country came to him because he treated men for certain ailments.
Oh, okay.
But
They got a pill for that now, y'all.
yeah, but no. But his thing was total healing. So, and he used all natural ingredients and all this stuff. But we grew up just being very, very in conversation with nature. And to me, like, the church wasn't always about that. You know, I was one of the last people like baptized in our river, in the Santee Harris Creek of Santee River. But among the last group, not me, but the last group. Yeah, so I'm just saying that our practices, we brought the sensibility of our spirituality, and whether we would become Muslim or Christian, what to me is special is what we did with it as African people.
Yeah.
And I think that's unique. And that's, for me, yeah.
What about all of the musicians from just Clarksdale, Mississippi, Sam Cooke and Ike Turner and,
Right.
all the people that are there that had maybe started in the church and then later on went to play blues music. Georgia Tom, who played with Ron Rainey, who became Dorsey, his last name is Thomas Dorsey, became the father of gospel music,
Right.
got his start. So why do you think that is?
For the same, to me, that's something African. I look at the Niger area in Senegal, Salif Keita. I look at Youssou N'Dour. I look at so all these African musicians who created. Baba Mal, my favorite,
Yeah,
who's
of
in Black Panther. You hear the voice of the ancestors. That's Baba Mal, the Senegalese Fulani singer. I think that spirit is what comes through. Christianity is important for us in this country, but at the same time, I think you can't reduce what they're doing to Christianity, because there are a lot of people who are Christian around the world who cannot sing like Sam Cooke. And I just say too, this last thing, Sam Cooke, that's on my ancestral Tiny Desk concert. In the mornings when I play my guitar, that song, The Change Is Gonna Come, that's something that's very special. Very special what they're able to do with it.
I hate to ask this question, and I'm always getting myself in trouble, but I hear you're talking about paintings and people in church. How come I have never seen a black Jesus? In all the churches I've been in, and I know he's from Africa. Come on, your paint. I've never seen a black Jesus.
Let the artist answer that.
Lord, that's artists paint what speaks to them, and unless if someone's willing to commission them, I can't speak. I grew up in church when I was a kid. I hadn't been there since, really. So maybe there's some other people who I know. There's a number of churches that have collections. I would hope that they have a black Jesus in there, but maybe somebody else could speak to that.
Well, and I want to hold on a second, Dr. Neris. It depends. I have seen them here. If you go to Shrine of the Black Madonna in the West End, you're going to see them, and you're going to see black women too. that like Shrine of the Black Madonna has a gigantic Mary. That's a black woman, and there's actually a church. It's in East Atlanta. Don't give me the lying, the name of the street. I actually just saw it last week. The stained glass window, it's an old church, it's old Atlanta. The stained glass windows are black Jesuses. So, they're out here. I think you just have to find them.
Can I say something just real quick, and it'll be very brief. There was a struggle within the black church here in the Southeast in the late 1800s. Bishop Daniel Payne with the AME, y'all hear me saying I'm AME, almost everything is AME. But Bishop Henry Neal Turner, who came from South Carolina, Abbeville, and then Macon, and then Atlanta, his whole movement as the leading Pan-Africanist before Marcus Garvey was based on the idea that God has to be black and depicted and thought of and conceived of and imagined as black for black people, or else we're not free. So it was like even not just a painting, but in the Southeast, and I claim Henry McNeil Turner as an honorary Gullah, because he also defended the ring shout. He said that you stop trying to stamp the ring shout out as we try to spread Christianity. A lot of people, we deal with that idea that people look at in history, that Africans in America adopted Christianity. During slavery, we really could not practice Christianity as much as people would think, because there are certain doctrines and literacy, of course, being very important. You can't have a literate group of people when you're trying to enslave them, and who are basing their story on a people seeking liberation from, even though Egyptians were not whatever. That's a whole other story. We'll talk about that.
That's a whole political argument.
So yes, that's all I
Yeah.
want to say, that folks own that question in here. Very important in the Southeast.
And I was just going to add that now thinking about it, I mean, a lot of people aren't comfortable with the black image of Christ in the church. I mean, at least when I grew up and thinking about like even my aunties and the ones that I would frequent, they'd have that, the old Dr. King up and Kennedy and a white Christ. Like the concept of a white Jesus is something that many of the generation before me were never comfortable with. So, I mean, maybe things have changed. But artists are always looking to take commissions. So.
And as you say that, I think we also have to remember is that stereotypical picture of Jesus that we see is an artist rendering, because that's Michelangelo's cousin. So it comes from this history of art. Yeah.
In Egypt too, at St. George's Church, one of the oldest churches in the world, their depiction is very small, but it's Christ is black, like he got afro. He looked like he come from right here and look at you.
And I saw that also when I was in Ethiopia. Like, Ethiopians are very clear. We ain't never been colonized, and Jesus is black. Just brief. I'm gonna defer to the elder.
One line. I just wanted to say that you mentioned about the ring shout. Only time I really seen it depicted was in Beloved with B. Richards, and it was really outstanding. My second comment, if it's okay, about the connection between a juke joint and the church, as depicted in The Color Purple, the original, very much. And one other thing, just three. One line is that I'm not sure which book it is in, Walter Mosley's. I don't know if it's the
Devil in the Blue Dress.
That depiction of Robert Johnson is it's scary.
Well, he's got, so if we're going to bring that type of author in, so throughout his books, you see the depiction, so Robert Johnson is there, but you also see a depiction of the hoodoo, the conjure woman. And I don't think we've talked enough about that, so I want to go back to that first. Is there anybody that's not familiar with the concept of a conjure woman? Hoodoo, voodoo, okay. So can you talk a little bit about, Sam. I want you to talk about this concept of a conjure woman specifically. Najee, I want you to talk about how does a conjure woman show up in your work?
Okay.
So, personal, cultural connection, diasporic connection, and then to Africa. Personal, my mother, I told you she's an evangelist, but before she became an evangelist, she helped to take care of our great-great-grandmother, Harriet Edwards Witherspoon, as she made transition, being about 117 years old. She was the one who passed the story that we were from Timbuktu. She was not a member of the church. She was a member of the church, but she wasn't a practicing Christian. Well, what was she? She practiced a form of Islam called Bori Islam, which is a combination of Mandinka, African religious practices combined with Islam. So my mom, I started, she started telling me this when I was about 12 years old. And, there were certain practices that she used. There were certain healing practices that she insisted on. And there were certain rhythms with nature she insisted on. And to me, that captures what a conjure woman is. Somebody who is conversant with our ancestral traditions, who is insistent upon healing, and then the rhythms with nature. And I think that's very important, that our traditional healers converse and commune with nature, not just in the front yard, but getting into the woods, getting into the garden, making sure that we're attuned to the sun and the rhythm of the sun especially, and understanding how the sun and the moon work to actually create a balance if we work with it in our bodies.
My first influence was George Hunt out of Memphis, mixed media artist, and then later came Bearden and Benny Andrews and others. But I think Bearden's Conjure Woman, which he did a number of, was really the influence in me wanting to do my interpretation, you know. It's the same way I came to doing this piece I called This My Ball, and I wanted to be on record, you know, and showing my contribution to a given topic. And that's really the reason why I ended up doing the Conjure Woman. But I'm also, you know, I don't know, a knucklehead or a naysayer to like just traditional, not just traditional things, but like, I don't just believe that what the government or what medicine puts out from a business standpoint is for us. I think that, you know, connecting with nature is important. And so to me, it speaks to that interest too. That not all things, you know, there's a lot of good stuff that are natural that we've kind of gotten away from, and to me, the Conjure Woman kind of speaks to that. But it's really more so from the history of the artist that's done it before for me.
I want you, everyone in this audience, to please help me in thanking Dr. Sam Livingston. We also got to thank the folks that work hard, that we got to give acknowledgement. There's Don Tenarius. Where's?
And Akia.
Where's she at? She's around here somewhere. And then let's thank the artist, Najee Dorsey.
Let's thank Dr. Ojelade.
Yes.
Ifetayo for curating.
So I'll say it one more time. The work is for sale. Just remember, like at Kmart, you can come up here and handle your business. And I'm sure Najee will hang out if you have more questions. So thank you, everyone.
Oh yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate you.